Interesting. Okay. All right. We talk Hawks. We are here with Brice, content extraordinaire journalist, and we are going to talk about the Hawks and off-season plans, preseason, last season, and kind of the foundation for going forward. So before we start, Brice, do you want to plug anything before we start?
Yeah. First, thank you for letting me come on. I always appreciate going on with you guys. I mean, if you followed me for a little bit, covering Hawks and Falcons, been doing that for the last couple of years. Um, just started a new podcast before this last previous Hawks season. Believe in Hawks. Definitely go check that out. Got a new episode. Audio wise is already out. Video wise will be out tomorrow. Definitely check that out. Really good insight from an NBA insider. And also, like I said, Twitter, Brice_2K. YouTube, Brice_2K as well. If you want to keep up with me, subscribe. Definitely help a brother out. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so I can start making some money because it'd be tough out here. But yeah, so definitely appreciate any love, anything like that, any feedback. Always open to it. Always open to dialogue and discussion, and just trying to help. Be someone maybe people can, I don't want to say rely on, but someone they can trust in the Atlanta sports community.
All right. Appreciate it. So, like I mentioned about the Hawks, so we all know they had a disappointing season, but expectations from you with Quin and Trey, and he's known for his system and things like that. So, what was your prior thoughts of Quin, and how do you think that kind of meshed with the season? We know it didn't work out as far as the record, but as far as personal development, team success, etc.
Yeah, I like Quin coming in. I was a fan of the pickup. I mean, I just felt like under Nate, and I when I break up Nate, I don't want to make it seem like I'm bashing him, but like I just felt like with today's NBA, you need creativity. You need a guy who can really imagine things for players and have a plan. And I feel like Nate was kind of an old school coach where he was just kind of like, you guys need to figure it out. I'll just give you the game plan. You guys figure it out. Quin is much more of a teacher, much more of a developer, someone who's willing to work with their players and really be engaged with those guys and try to help them improve. That's why you did see multiple players this season improve. We always used to talk about under Nate, it felt like nobody improved. And that's why we were frustrated. And now I could say, well, multiple people improved under Quin. So realistically, coming into the season, I mean, they obviously installed their system. They didn't do that last year. They only installed certain pieces and bits. This was the first offseason, this past offseason, that where they got their coaches in, was able to install some things, try to get some things going. And, obviously it's a work in progress. You're working through some things. You saw that, and you're also trying to be competitive. Because like what Quin said, he said this in the media day. He said, usually in these situations, you're able to build this up a little bit. There's not pressure. But he knew there was already pressure. People are expecting results quicker. So he knew the growing pains were going to be there. And it's just a matter of just how do we, persevere through them. So obviously you saw the results of the season. We saw what's happening. We saw what's going on. And, it didn't end up the way we wanted. I think, the backcourt still figuring out. There were times where it seemed like DeJounte and Trey played well together. There were times where it seemed like it was a little clunky. Just figuring, we questioned some of the rotations, which, I mean, it's very fair to criticize. No coach is outside of the realm of being criticized. People are still criticizing playoff coaches that are still in the game right now playing. So it's one of those things that's just part of it being a coach. You're never going to make every perfect decision. You're going to have things that you believe in, and not everybody's going to believe in that and agree with that. And that's just part of the job for him. But, I think he has a good eye for talent. I think he wants the best. I think, like I said, Trey had one of his best seasons under him. So he got a lot out of your star player. DeJounte had a career year basically under Quin as well. So it's just more about the cohesion, roster construction, which I think has been a big issue, and just getting the players that fit what he wants to do. That's going to be the biggest thing realistically if we're going to really see what Quin Snyder can do with this team, because we're trying to judge him based off what he did with the team that we had, not the team that he wanted.
Okay. Building on that, when you listen to Quin talk about his ethos, what he wants to see, the 53s, the 50 layups, the pace and space, that 0.5 mentality. Do you think A, he has the roster for it, and B, if he needs to make adjustments, or the team needs to make adjustments to the roster, how long do you think that would take?
I think it's one of those things. I think when you watch the Hawks at the beginning of the year, I felt like they were a team that definitely was only a layup or a 3 shooting team. And I feel like that's why you would see parts of the game where they would play really, really well. And then when the three or whatever started not falling and the cohesion was lost, you started to see the downtrend. You started to see them blow leads more often. You started to see just inconsistent play. And I think as the season went on, they kind of adjusted. You saw a lot more guys start taking mid-range games. Because that was one thing that, Quin maybe wasn't a big component of, is the mid-range. But I think the mid-range is making a comeback in the NBA, because you're seeing in the postseason how important it is. Like, if a team blocks you off from the rim and you're not able to get a three, if you can hit that mid-range, it can be very key for you. And you got guys like DeJounte, who's a mid-range assassin. But, it's one of those things where I think there definitely are some pieces that need to be moved around. I think Clint was the guy who clearly stood out last year as a sore thumb in Quin's system. Obviously, we know what he brings to the table, rebounding. He brings, him the ability to block shots, but we know that he lacks offensive ability. We know that he lacks the free throw line, and that he's just not the most nimble guy in the world. And I think you saw at times, especially when Okongwu was able to start before he got hurt, Okongwu was averaging close to 18 points a game. So you saw him play really, really well. And I feel like Okongwu is more of a Quin Snyder-ish player than a Clint Capella. And I think when you get the guys in there who fit what he wants to do, it's important. Now, in terms of a timetable, it doesn't have to take forever. It's just a matter of how aggressive the front office is willing to be. How aggressive is Landry and Ressler willing to be to acquire the guys that are needed in those situations? That's why you hear all these trade rumors, like who fits, who doesn't fit, who works, who doesn't fit. I think you got guys like Kobe Buffkin that you're excited about. Obviously Seth had his season cut short due to that ankle injury, but he's the guy that people were excited about. Mohamed Gay is a guy a lot of people are excited about. And, these are all guys who I think fit the Quin mold, fit the type of players that Quin wants. So we have a draft class on the books that tells us what the type of players he wants. And so his biggest thing now is just continuing to build on that. You obviously have the first pick this year where you can continue to build to that. And then, like I said, you can make some tweaks to the roster in other places. I think you got guys like Vic Krejci, who should be prominent in the rotation next year. And, you're kind of starting to see a little bit of what they want, which is what today's NBA is: versatility, shooting, the ability to do different things, guard multiple positions. And that's, if you look at the teams that are currently in the playoffs right now, that's who's there. It's teams who are built like that, are long, lengthy defense, got shooters, you got your star players who can carry the offense, and just kind of going from there.
Okay. So we up here, like, we talk a lot about Hawks DNA, right? And so when you listen to Landry kind of talk about what Hawks DNA is, some people like, I get it. Other people are like, he kind of is amazed when he talks. Like, we really don't understand concretely what he's looking for. So one, do you feel like you know what Hawks DNA is? And then two, do you feel like we have enough players on the team where there's only a couple additions that need to be made to kind of fully infuse that, or we're going to need kind of a significant turnaround as far as the roster or turnover?
I feel like Hawks DNA kind of sounds cliche. I think it sounds like a guy who's just like, oh, we want guys who work hard and come in and really to commit themselves. But I mean, a lot of these teams have these same mentalities with their players. They have a certain type of player they want. You always want to try to build a culture. One thing I feel like the Hawks lacked, especially under Nate, was a culture. I felt like it was kind of just, you were there, you were playing basketball. There wasn't like this is what we are. You see with the Knicks, they have a culture, what Tom Thibodeau wants them to be. Pacers, you see what Carlisle wants them to be. And then I think the biggest thing for the Hawks is what do the Hawks want to be? What do the Hawks want to become? That's the biggest question that I think that people have wondered. Are we a fast break team? Are we a three-point shooting team? Are we a mid-range team? Are we a pick and roll team? What are we, a defensive team? Like, what is the identity that they're trying to establish? And sometimes that takes time. And like I said, with where we were, especially acquiring DeJounte, you're thinking we're trying to be competitive immediately. So a lot of people don't have patience. And obviously this season didn't help with that, realistically. So people are still going to be in a weird place with it. But, I think Hawks DNA is they just want players who are connected to what they want to do, who believe in what they're trying to do, and are as willing to go out there and put the work in to help. And that if everybody's on the same page, they can create the best product that you have or you can put on the floor, which results hopefully in wins and results in postseason. So that'll be the biggest thing. So in terms of the progress of the roster, they just realistically just have to get, like I said, better construction. of what they want. You know, obviously, I felt like when you traded John Collins a year ago, when you acquired Bay for the trade deadline, you had four wings. You had Jalen, DeAndre, John, Bay. You had like four guys. You traded John, you really didn't replace them. Now you have an injury. Now you're down to two people, and now you're lacking, and now you're having to play guys who are really two guards at the three just to survive. And then it got to a point where DeAndre had to play the four. You know, and that's what I mean by roster construction. You got to have guys ready to go, connected, who can play that position, who can step up into it. And you need Quin to be willing to give guys opportunities. Can't be afraid to allow a guy to grow into a position because, you know, that's part of the NBA, you know, and getting the ability. I feel like this front office kind of showed us that they kind of were just kind of going through the motions of the season, which was a little frustrating. But, you know, overall, I think, like I said, they make a couple of tweaks to the roster. That roster construction can get back right. It's just a matter of putting the right players around the guys and really the core guys, which right now is Trey and Jalen Johnson.
Okay. So, like, we have this, I feel like when you listen to the fan base, like, it's so divided. Like, you got these two divergent. Like, one is like, we're all in. We should be a championship team. You know, we were kind of mid under Nate. We brought in Quin. He's held in high esteem, so we should be championship. And then to your point, what you said in your previous answer about understanding what the Hawks DNA is, trying to figure out what is our style of play. What are we trying to do night to night? You know, saying our ethos. Combining the two is like some people understand and have patience, others don't. So as far as where you are with Quin, is he on a timeline? Do you feel like he has to start showing progress? Or do you feel like because we're lacking clearly some things that he needs to elevate a system that we should be more patient overall as a fan base?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think obviously, you know, you did have higher expectations when Quin was brought in, but we also had to be realistic. The roster wasn't that good previously. Then what? I mean, we can't always assume that a coach is going to just flip around an entire team's, you know, projection for the season. Like, you know, they can help establish something, they can help guys improve, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily going to just flip it on their back and now all of a sudden they're an elite team. It just depends on where you are as a roster. I think Quin, obviously, he came here to be competitive. He didn't come here to rebuild. That's why I think the rebuilding thing isn't realistic, because that's not what he came here for. He came on here with the impression that they were going to compete. And like Sham said it a few months ago on the Jeff T podcast. He said Quin knows he needs Trey, and Trey knows he needs Quin if they're going to have success in Atlanta. So that's why, for me, when you hear that and you've heard Trey in press conferences talk about Quin and just, you know, say we need to get the right guys in here for him, you know, that tells you that your star player says, like, I believe in what he's trying to do. We just got to get the right things for him so he can be successful as a coach. You can't expect, not everybody's Eric Spoelstra, where you could take a bunch of Twitter timeline guys and win a postseason game. All right. That's just not gonna, like, that's just very rare air. So in most situations, you need to get a coach what he needs so he can make something. Right. You're not making chicken salad, man. You're trying to make chicken rotisserie here. So I think realistically for him, he understands, you know, you're going into your second full year as the Atlanta Hawks head coach. If you don't have success, there's going to be questions about your job security. That's just going to be natural. But biggest thing for them, I think, is just, I think the thing we have to understand right now is it's hard to win the league. It's not easy. You can have a really good team and still not win. Like think about Boston. They've been in the Eastern Conference Finals the last 3 years, right? And I'm sure Hawks fans would love to be in that situation, but they haven't won a championship yet. But at the end of the day, you're also knowing you're going to be one of the top teams year after year. So it shows you how difficult it can be. And all you can do is just keep retooling, keep refixing, keep changing some things here and there and hoping that you'll have a better success. Can't just expect a 1 year run and then boom, we're going to win a championship. So it does take time. Boston, it took time. Timberwolves took time. Oklahoma City's building it right now. It's not a quick process, even though we want it to be.
Exactly. So balancing the two, right? Balancing being competitive, as you said, showing some type of progress, showing some type of growth, but then understanding the bigger picture where it takes 7 years, right? And so Trey's in his 6th year or going into a 7th year. So ideally, we would be farther ahead. I mean, I can admit that we should be farther ahead. But given that, as far as looking out now at the summer, right? We kind of know what we need, looking at the evaluation, looking at Quin's system, looking at what guys fit, what guys don't fit. when it comes to the draft process and the number one pick, where are you with that? As far as should we look to draft a player, or should we maybe pivot that pick to get a win now player for Trey?
Um, I'm more in the side of drafting a guy just because, again, you kind of build your team with guys that you can keep right now, especially if you're not trying to spend a lot of money. Because here's the thing: people talk about wrestling not spending money, and before last season, that was a very fair argument. There's a lot of teams in the league right now who do not want to get into luxury tax. Even Golden State wants to get under the luxury tax because nobody wants to get to that second apron because it truly restricts what you can do with your team. Like it stops you from making particular moves. You can't get buyout players. You can't get any of those people like you could in the past. So teams are trying to manage their money, especially if there's some young players they want to sign to big contracts in the future. So I think for me in that situation, you want to, build your team. If you're trying to Hawks DNA your culture, you got to bring in players that you want to be the foundational pieces that you don't mind giving contracts to for 5, 8, 10 years. And if Sar, who I think they'll take with the first pick, is the guy, that is a guy you may feel like you can build around for 10 years. Because you may trade for a win now player, and that guy may only be here for 2 to 3 years. And so you have to think about those things, unless that's why if the Hawks were a player away and then boom, they could win a championship. Okay, I get you got the first pick. Let's make a trade. But you're not. And so you get a win now player again. Okay, we'll become a playoff team. Well, if we get eliminated in the second round, again, depends on contract situation with the player we acquire, what he wants. Does he want to be in Atlanta? If we only get him on a 2-year deal, we don't win nothing in 2 years, he's out. Or at least with a guy like Sar, you have him for at least 4 years. And you can build. And then if it don't work out, you don't have to re-sign him. If it does work out, you give him the extension and you continue to have him around and continue to build. So I think that's kind of where I think the league is also just shifting right now. You're seeing a lot of teams build from the draft. And then once they know they have that core in place and they're competitive and they're making the playoffs, all right, let's add some key veterans and now try to make a run.
Okay. I agree. You look at Denver, right? They started with Jokic. They started with Murray, right? They added Porter Jr. through the draft. Then they went out and got Aaron Gordon. Then they went and they had Gary Harris, right, in their backcourt with Will Barton. That wasn't working. So they switched out Gary Harris for KCP. Boom. They went and got Bruce Brown in free agency, turned him into a point guard. Boom, won a championship, So Minnesota's kind of building up from the draft. You got Cat first, then you went and got Ant-Man, then you got McDaniels. You went traded for Gobert to supplement what they were bad at, and now you went to go get defenders. Hopefully you thought a couple good shooters to kind of round out the team, and then now you're competitive. So with Sar, assuming that we have JJ, right? We have Trey. Those are the two kind of foundational guys, I think. With adding Sar, does that alter the timeline a little bit as far as do we start him? Do we come off the bench? If he does start, considering that big man take a minute to develop, what is that kind of message to Trey from organization? Like, hey, man, we're trying to win, right? Quinn's trying to win. We're all trying to win. But also we're thinking about the next 10 years with Sar.
I think it's a double-edged sword a little bit. I think you do want to compete because I think Sar can come in and I think he can help the team. I don't think it's not a matter if he can't help the team. You can help the team. It's just the player that he could become, he won't be immediately. And that may take a couple of years. But realistically, doesn't mean he cannot impact what the team does right now. Because like I said, the one thing you can sell to Trey is we can get that win now player for you, keep him for 2-3 years, and then we got to go through this cycle again. Or we can draft Sar. If he ends up hitting like we expect him to hit, you could be in Atlanta with him for the next 5 to 10 years. Your pick and roll partner, someone that you can rely on, like that relationship you have with Clint Capella, but, obviously we would expect with more talent. And, be able to now carry this team for a long period of time. I think sometimes it just depends on where a player is in their career. Trey's 25. So he still, I think, is at the point where he can think about, okay, I in a couple of years, I got to decide I'm going to sign another contract with the Hawks. All right, if Sar ends up working out by the time my contract comes up, I have my big for my next max contract. And then if Jalen works out, I got my core. Like you have all those pieces in place where if we trade for a guy and he leaves, like BI on an expiring contract, you make that trade, he leaves. Now Trey is another year closer and he's like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? And the thing about it is like when you're building a team, sometimes you got to make tweaks. Sometimes you make a move, it doesn't work out to the success you think, and you got to change it up. It's just part of it. It's not easy doing this job. Like I said, it's not easy at all. It's just a matter until you find that right combination, that right fit, the right coach, and the right, scheme and culture. That's what will get you the success that you want. So I think realistically, you kind of have to sell Trey on we're trying to maintain long-term success, not just short-term success. The big three era was the short-term success era. That was we'll sign these guys to their max deals 2, 3, 4 years, and then we'll see where we are. Now teams like Denver, they've been pretty good basically since 2021, since the COVID.
Probably before that, probably 2019.
I mean, they were good, but like in terms of like Western Conference
championship window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So and they've been good since then. They had Jamal was hurt. That's why they didn't go further, but they were still winning 40, 50 games. Joker was winning MVPs. Mm-hmm. He got back. They win a chip. They seem like they're about to beat Minnesota, go to the Western Conference Finals again. They don't seem like the next couple years with Jamal Murray and Joker and all of them can stay healthy. They're going to continue to win. That's long-term success. That's something that if they just said, let's just go get that one big-time player, it may only been a couple of years of success. So it's a fine line of, we want to win, but we also don't want to ruin our long-term projection and perspective. Because like I said, a lot of teams in this league are building teams that can stay good, not just be good for a short period of time.
Okay. So the point of attack defense, right? You mentioned earlier about the wings that we didn't reinforce and fortify that position head into the season. Now, me personally, I'm not saying it was all on purpose, but I think making sure that you kind of let JJ develop and flourish without having a veteran there to compete with him was part of the calculus. So considering that we know what the holes are, you add in Sarr, as we would assume, to the starting lineup, right? As far as the other changes to the roster, what do you foresee there?
I think you'll probably see the end of Clint Capella to me. I think that's more realistic. I know people are not, for some reason, high on Okongwu, but I think Clint's the guy who you're probably going to end up moving. I know a lot of people want to move Hunter, but I'm not sold that we are going to do that. Like at the end of the day, if your fourth, if I said your fourth option is averaging 16 points, shooting about 40% from three, you'd probably be like, all right, that's pretty decent. All right, that's what I would expect, and has the occasional 20, 30-point game. Like, all right, yeah. And then you put the name DeAndre Hunter on it, it's like, ooh, that's how people feel. Like, it's just like, and that's why it's like, if you can upgrade over him, sure, but that's the key. Can you upgrade over him? You don't just need to make a move because you hate a guy. I mean, that's just honest. Right. A lot of people like to move people just they don't like a player, not because they have an actual legitimate replacement for him. So I think overall, I think you had Jalen develop. I think Hunter showed some improvement. Obviously, it sucks what happened to Bay, but could be a blessing in disguise because now this allows a guy like Vic Krejci an opportunity. Could potentially allow guys like AJ Griffin or Seth Lundy potentially opportunities. It could allow Muhammad Gay an opportunity, and these are guys who are considered more two-way-ish guys than what Bay is. Where Bay, he can bring offense. And even though Bay struggled with his shot this past year, he improved just, attacking the rim, finishing. I didn't know Bay was as good of a finisher as I've seen this past year. And these are the things that Quinn's supposed to figure out and try to get out of his players. It's just the three-point shot didn't fall. If the three-point shot fell, now you got a guy who can beat you two ways. So I think overall, there are moves that you can make. Obviously, people talk about Brandon Ingram. There's other guys. Donovan Mitchell was brought up recently. But at the end of the day, it is kind of the thing where you just kind of got to make it work with your guys. You kind of have to make it work with what you have, but also know, okay, if this is what we lacked, how can we upgrade this? Is there a player that we already have? Is there a player that we can acquire? Does it fit in with our vision? Does it fit in with what we want to do? Because like I said, you don't want to just throw players together and say, well, because they're a good player, boom, now we got to put them in there.
Okay. So building on that, as for Brandon Ingram, Donovan Mitchell, right? Like I'm sure you see on Hawks Twitter, like I want Brandon Ingram more. Now that Donovan Mitchell's a possibility, he worked with Quinn, he's friends with Trey. Do you have a perspective on that? And if you do, considering that they're both free agents, what's that price for you? What would that price look like?
I feel like with Brandon Ingram to start with, it's kind of the same situation as they were with Pascal. A lot of people wanted Pascal, but Pascal was on a expiring deal, and there's no guarantee he was going to resign. And listen, we literally saw the Toronto Raptors win an NBA Finals and Kawhi still leave. If a player is dead set on leaving, they're going to leave. And so some people are literally just make the move and just hope for the best. But if you make the move, you give up the assets, and he leaves, then what are you going to tell Trae Young? What are you going to tell DeJounte Murray? How are you going to convince them that they're going to be able to stay competitive? And that's why, again, I think that's why the Hawks are taking the approach they're taking with the building method, because they don't want just, we don't have an answer because we don't have a player and we have to scramble. That's what the Lakers are doing year by year, scrambling. How do we fix it this year? Well, who can we acquire this year? Who can we trade for this year? Because since they're a big market team, they're in that pressure of we got to consistently compete for championships with LeBron and AD. So we don't have time to build. We just got to get guys. And I think some Hawks fans think the Hawks are in that same situation, but we don't got LeBron and AD on our team. Right. So it's a little bit of a different situation. And so I think BI, again, same situation. Would he stay? You assume, if you win, yeah. But at the same time, Brandon Ingram has injury issues. If he gets hurt and you made the investment, did you really improve? Did you really get better? Every player has a risk, though. There's no guarantee. The thing is, one thing I always want to tell people, there is no guarantee. Everything is a hope. And you just hope it works out in your favor. And the same thing with Donovan Mitchell. I don't sense him leaving Cleveland. I think he wants to stay in Cleveland. But I guess if there was ever a situation where he felt like, okay, Cleveland's not serious about winning, I do need to look elsewhere. And, obviously the Hawks are a team that was mentioned as a dark horse, and they'll probably keep an eye on him. But again, with Donovan Mitchell, obviously when you make a trade, if you made a trade for him, you would need a commitment that he's going to sign an extension. You don't want to play out the 1 year, let's hope to God he stays. Because again, you're playing a risky game. And if it don't work out, then we're going to be in this position next year, upset, complaining, what's going on, because all it takes is Trey getting hurt again, Jalen getting hurt again, things just not working out. Their season don't turn out the way you want it to, and now we're right back where we started. Or Donovan goes down, or Brandon Ingram goes down, and then we made a trade. Now he can't even play. Like I said, it's tough. It's tough.
I mean, you look at the backcourt, right? Like you look at the Hawks backcourt. The numbers suggest it doesn't work, right? It's not working. The defense isn't working. Offensively, it's better when either one is on the floor, right? So as far as them going forward, building around Trey, continues to build around Trey, or flip Trey for assets, and then I guess still have DJ for a time period to try to make sure we don't hit the bottom floor in there. So where do you kind of lay on that as far as keeping Trey, trading him for assets, pivoting off what hasn't been successful in the grand scheme of things as far as a championship?
I'm one of those people who I definitely feel like we should keep Trey. I just think here's the thing I always say about people who say trade your best player for assets. If that's the case, then why don't the Bucks do it for Giannis? They could get an absolutely massive package for Giannis, but why won't they do it? You could ask for a lot of star players in this league. Why don't they trade their best player? Because at the end of the day, if you don't get a player better than him, are you really better? That's the thing. When you get a superstar, if you can't get a player better than him, then you're not better. You may have a better overall team, but sometimes when it comes to the playoffs, you see it's your stars that take you home. And if the other team has the best player on the floor and you don't, that could be the difference. Where in certain situations, Trey could be the best player on the floor. And then that could be the difference in why the Hawks win. When you think about the Boston Game 5 last year, we won that game because Trae Young for that game was the best player on the floor.
Absolutely.
That's why you do it, And I'm not saying DeJounte can't do it because he's shown us he can have big games and do big things. But realistically, in the grand scheme of things, if you think about what the type of team you want to build, I feel like you don't move your star unless you feel like you can get something better. And that's the thing. Like if you told me that Minnesota was going to offer up Anthony Edwards and they want Trey in return, that may be a situation where you're like, oh shoot, I mean, we may be getting better. So then you can make a justification. But if it's not a player like that, it's like, what are we doing here? So
right.
I think the big question they have to ask themselves is, what can they do to make this backcourt work? Is it that we just need to get better defenders around him? Because the thing is, you have a lot of guys who couldn't. You had a backcourt where Bogey isn't the greatest defender. Bay wasn't the greatest defender. So you only had, 3-4 guys in the rotation last year who were actually decent defensive players. You got to upgrade that. I on my pod today, I asked my guy, I was like, if you draft Sarr, does that make it more likely that you keep them? Because now you have this elite rim protector where now if guards get past DeJounte and Trey, you have a guy who can stop them right in their tracks because of the shot blocking ability. We've seen what happens with Victor Wembanyama when people try to come into the paint and how that dictates things. That can help make your defense better. So I think that's the biggest thing for the Hawks to do. And Landry mentioned it. He's like, well, what do we need to do to help them be successful? Have we done everything we needed to help them be successful? Or is it truly that they just don't work in certain situations? So, because we've seen some great moments and we've seen some bad moments from them. So it's a matter of just figuring out the right things. And that's why I feel like I've told people, get prepared. Hawks might not move one of them this offseason. They may go with Sarr and say, let's see what happens with this backcourt with Jalen in his next year, with Sarr, and see what that looks like. Just it's almost like you want to, like, what are we gonna see? What are we gonna do?
That's interesting. You would you keep them together? Because all the data suggests they're not good together.
I feel like that you should, if you have the ability to upgrade at one of those positions, then you should definitely look into it. That's the thing. It has to be an upgrade. You cannot just bring in a player, That's why I think we're so particular about the players in these trades that we try to, like, mock up, because we're trying so hard to get a player who will basically be better than what we just gave up. But it's sometimes really, really hard to get equal value for players. And so you have to decide, well, what's best. Now, I've said that moving them would probably be beneficial for guys like Kobe Buffkin, just so he can see the rotation. Because I don't know, unless Quin's willing to not stack Trey and DeJounte, I don't see how he's going to touch the floor. Especially if Bogey's still here. So I think those are things you have to, look at, for me. So I think realistically, it's like I said, it's not an easy decision because of what you gave up for DeJounte. But at the same time, you also got to make sure whatever move you make is actually benefiting the team. And that's honestly, at the end of the day, that's all we all want. It's just the team to be better. We want the team to be competitive, and we want to have a product that we're proud of. As much as people kind of, it's funny, I feel like people crap on that era of Hawks basketball when we made the playoffs for like 8, 9, 10 straight years. But at least you knew every season, at least we're going to be a winning team. At least we're going to make the postseason. Right now, we don't have that certainty with our team. We hope they do. We think they should, but they haven't. So you got to make the confident, got to have the fan base get confidence again in what you're doing.
So, I mean, what's popular right now is Ingram for DJ straight up, or something close to it. Maybe you throw in AJ, maybe you throw in a pick. You bring back Brandon Ingram. The team is more balanced immediately, right? You have your wing player. You kind of diversify the shot chart and the shot profile and move it from the backcourt to where you have, your star point guard, and then you have two good wings in Jalen and Ingram who can kind of take it against bigger teams, more elite teams, and kind of take over the scoring load if Trey kind of isn't efficient because of the height and some of the things like that. What do you think about that?
I mean, it could definitely work. I mean, Brandon Ingram's a good player. I just think, again, with him, he's a guy who still hasn't proved it on the biggest stage. To me, he's had some big games, but I think we don't look at Brandon Ingram, especially if we're thinking, if you're one of those people who just cares about postseason, he's not one of those people who's shown you in the postseason, like, yeah, he's it, especially with the injury issues and et cetera. So you make the move. The potential is there for sure. Defensively, you'll be able to be versatile. There's a lot of positives to it. It's just, do you believe in him being healthy, and do you believe when the moments rise up, will he rise to the occasion? It's the same thing with CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum's a good guard, but in the postseason, he doesn't show up. Is Ingram that kind of player, or is he legit? And that's what I'm saying. A lot of these guys that we're asking to trade for that we may realistically be able to get, there are question marks with these guys. And we're just assuming that if they're with us, then those questions will be the positive direction, and it could be the negative.
Okay. Let's say Ingram, right? Because we know Donovan is solidified. We know he's big game. Okay. With Brandon Ingram, right? That's more, I would say, more attainable. You have to give up less assets. Would a SAR kind of dissipate the expectations for Ingram, where if we get SAR, Ingram doesn't necessarily have to hit that ceiling that he would typically for being a number 2, because we still have SAR, we still have Jalen, we still have kind of the other guys at Kobe, other guys in a pipeline. So, what do you think about that?
I mean, obviously, that would be ideal if you have some guys who can come up. I mean, the big thing too here is, I think the big wild card is Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, some people think that he may be able to become the best player on the team. And so what he becomes is going to be the biggest factor in that decision. And then you also have to ask that question: can Jalen Johnson and Brandon Ingram play together? We can't just assume it's going to be a fit. Zion and Ingram didn't work. You're basically if you put Ingram back at the 3 and Jalen's at the 4, how do we know this is going to work? Again, that's something you have to assess. You have to look at each other's, both of their games, and say, all right, is this going to work? Is this ideal? If in a perfect world, if it works, great defense, both players can score 20 points, both players really good. You got Trae Young. You feel good about your future. And like you said with SAR, I don't know if SAR is ever going to become that type of offensive player, but he might. And that's the biggest thing, again, in the NBA, is that a lot of it is hope. A lot of it is that you believe in your development, you believe in what you're doing, you believe in building, and you have to have a commitment to it. Because trust me, if we had Nick McMillan right now and we drafted SAR, I'd feel terrible because this man doesn't develop. So I'm just being honest, he doesn't develop. So how do we know SAR is going to reach his potential? Where at least I could say that Quin, I know, is going to work with him. They're going to work on his shot. They're going to help him try to get his game up as much as they can. But they also understand it's not a 40-yard dash. It's not a 100-meter relay. It's a jog. It's like, if we can see progress, if we see you progress as the season comes on, then we know we've made the right decision in making that move and acquiring you, drafting you in the draft. That's the biggest thing you want to see, is do you see progression? Because he's gonna have some bad moments. We have to understand he's a rookie. He's gonna have some games where he gets cooked. Like I always tell these people, you all are so excited for these young guys, but then want to turn on when they have that bad game or get cooked or go through a struggle. And it's like, it's just part of the game. They're not going to be perfect all 82. You just have to be there. You have to see how they persevere through it. How do they work through it? Is there something they're trying to change to try to get out of that funk that they're in? So I think that's all part of what they're trying to do in Atlanta. And if SAR can build to that and they feel like SAR is a guy who's going to work hard, and there's a lot of potential with SAR, especially in his offensive game, that could end up being ideal. But if Jalen Johnson also reaches that level we think he can be, I mean, now have 2 players who could be legit stars for you. And then if you could have got a guy like Ingram and he ends up being good and he ends up staying more healthy, you're probably feeling like you're in a really good spot if you're Atlanta.
Yeah. I mean, the hard part is balancing the two, like bringing SAR along slowly, right? Because he's going to have ebb and flows. I mean, every big man does, right? Me personally, I know it's not a popular opinion, but me personally, I would keep a combo. I would trade Capella. I wouldn't start SAR. Or if I did start him, I would platoon his minutes with Akanwu and play him 25 minutes a night, work with him in practice, work with him on screen engagement, adding weight, different little things that I need him to work on. So we're not disappointed, right? When we get on national TV and he's just having a bad night because it's just bound to happen in the NBA. And now we're at Landry on Twitter, or saying, "Oh, we suck as a franchise. We should have picked somebody else." So I think having an idea going into the season and saying, "Okay, we want to win, right? We want to." Or let me ask you: is it that we want to win? Do we want to be young and fun with SAR and JJ and hope they develop and kind of bring that along, and have Trey be patient, or do we say we got SAR, right? We got JJ developing, but everybody else is veterans?
I think, again, with the fact that people want to build long-term stability, it's kind of like you're trying to find that fine line between the youth and then, getting veterans that you want to have to help you compete. You know, I've also pitched the idea of SAR because of not starting potentially, just because I was only more because of a minutes thing. I don't know they're going to have him. I don't think they're going to have him playing 30, 35 minutes, just because when you have those tall, 7-foot skinny guys, they're a little bit more prone for injuries. They need to still develop their bodies. So you don't want to put them in a position where you're putting them out there and they get hurt. And now we're not going to see what we think he can be. Listen, at the end of the day, too, people, like I said, are down Okongwu, even though literally the last thing we've seen of Okongwu was 18 points a game. I have to keep reiterating that because people make it seem like the last thing we saw of him was not good, and that's not the truth. People are not thrilled about Okongwu because of his height. That's literally the main thing that's knocking people for him. But he's a good defender, and he can score the ball. I mean, you just don't give that up, for what, Bruno? Which I'm fine with Bruno. I like Bruno. But, I know Okongwu can come into the game, and if he get in the right situation, can give you 15, 20 points maybe. He's still working on his three-point shot. He is a good defender who can switch and guard multiple positions. That's valuable. You can't just act like that's not. And also, again, with the pairing with Jalen Johnson, we have seen positive numbers. You can look it up between Jalen and Okongwu playing together. Like there really isn't a lot of negative to it outside of just the rebounding thing, outside of the height thing, which, again, it's not like if you draft SAR, it's not like you're not going to play him. So it's just one of those things where maybe, as time goes on, you change the lineup, you change some things up, but we don't need to be doom and gloom about that. I think you just have to find that right line of, okay, players that you think can really be good for you, young, develop, and improve, but also, hey, we're still trying to win. We're trying to be competitive. We're trying to show Trae Young that we're trying to move in the right direction. It's like I said, you're trying to build this sustainable winning is basically what they're trying to do. Sustainable, stable, long-term winning, but also still having players along the way that you can continue to improve and develop along that path so then they can reach that next step.
Okay. Building on that, as far as so you talked about Capella, right? I think it's time to move on from Capella. When it comes to Bogey, Wesley Matthews was on 1-year deal. Garrison Matthews, Bay is a free agent. Kind of, do you look at the roster and kind of recalibrate it, or do you say I'm adding SAR, I might add in an Ingram or somebody of that caliber, so now I'm fine with kind of re-signing everybody, and I won't say running it back, but kind of keeping the foundation that I've had the last year and a half?
I feel like you can always look at what players played well for you last year and that you feel it could help you, and what players you could potentially go after. Obviously, Bay is an interesting situation because he's not going to play if he resigned, and basically he wouldn't even have a chance of playing until the end of the next season. Mm-hmm. So, I've always said I would not be surprised if they sign him to like a 1-year restricted free agent tender, let him rehab in Atlanta, and then I guess depending on how the season goes, that may dictate if they want to keep him again or let him walk, right? Garrison Matthews, he shot the ball really, really well last year. But at the same time, it feels like the way the path of everything is going, he might not be in the rotation this year, which is fine. Sometimes you need those guys like Garrison Matthews where it's like, we really had to play someone. We at least know when he comes off the bench, he can shoot threes. You know what I'm saying? Like you want to be able to know, oh, we have this at least. Because that's really what you want to do when you're putting depth on the bench. It's just, do we have a guy, if we needed him in a pinch, he could come in? That's why I think Wesley Matthews, really the issue with Wesley is he wasn't making shots last year, especially the first half of the year. Man was shooting like 20% from three. At least shoot threes well. and then you're fine because he's a 3-and-D guy at this point in his career. If he shoots 35, 36% from three and gives you some solid defense, that's really all you expect from him. If you expect more from him, then that's on you. You know, every player has a role. Every player has an expectation. Every player has a defined description of what they need to do if they're ever called upon. If they can't do that role, then yeah, you probably need to move off of them. If they can, then why are we so upset? I feel like sometimes we get to that third unit and we're mad that they're not all stars or potential to be starters. And I'm like, that's not a lot of guys in the NBA are not. So I mean, they're brought in for a particular reason, and you got to hope for the best with them. So I think Garrison has a chance. Bay maybe. Wesley maybe. Like all these guys are maybes. It just depends on the Hawks, unless the Hawks feel like there's other guys out there they can sign for like minimum contracts that they feel like maybe more beneficial. Or again, if they make any other trades, get some more draft picks, maybe draft some guys, things of that nature. Like I said, you still have your young guys that you have, like AJ and Muhammad Gay and Seth Lundy. So you have to kick that in consideration. Are we ready to maybe move them up a little bit on the depth chart, where if we're ever in an injury pickle, they'll be the next ones called up and ready to go for us?
Okay. Tony, right? I got to ask you about Tony. There's all this back perception amongst the fan base. He's cheap. You know, I would say 95% of the fan base believes he's cheap. He doesn't want to spend. He always comes out and says, I'll spend if the right guy is there, right? Or if this is the right window, I'll spend. Do you believe this is the summer that they spend? Or is it another year where it's like, I got to see how it goes, and we might be buyers at the deadline?
I mean, all evidence shows us that he hasn't spent. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, I'm sure if he had the opportunity to get a superstar player, he would spend. But I think the thing is, people want him to go out and tell them to force it. Just throw something at a superstar, and then we'll do something. I don't care if it completely ruins our future in construction. Just get me a star and I'll pay the money. And at the end of the day, you're not going to do that. Because like I said, I have to point to the Suns. Their GM's just throwing darts against the wall, bring some stars together, doesn't even think about construction. And now they have a bunch of rules. I mean, that they can't improve the team and things of that nature. I think obviously there are definitely times though that the Hawks should have maybe kept, because sometimes the problem with Wrestler isn't to me that he's not going after stars. It's the fact that there's certain players who aren't costing that much that he's refusing to try to make an offer. Obviously, we can talk about DeLon Wright. Didn't even make an offer to DeLon Wright. DeLon Wright ain't costing you $40 million, and you didn't make an offer. And I think those are the types of things that are frustrating with him, because it's like, what players are you willing to spend on, and what players are you not willing to spend on? And I just feel like that we don't have a clarity from him about what do you consider worth it and what you don't consider worth it. Our track record tells us that you just think, I got to do everything by all means necessary to stay below that cap. And people feel like that's affecting if we're going to continue to improve. Like, how are we going to win if you're going to just keep letting guys walk because you don't want to spend money? So, I mean, I feel like Wrestler definitely has some stuff he needs to do to help this team improve. He needs to be able to show a more willingness to spend and a more willingness to do what he needs to do to help this team be competitive if that's what he really, really wants. Because he did it literally the year they went to the playoffs in 2021. He spent money. And ever since then, he hasn't spent since. So if he's willing to put himself in a position to do that, then I think that, we'll be in a good spot. But it just depends on if him, Landry, and all of them see the same vision and know what they want this team to be.
See, my perspective is that he does spend, right? But he spends on the wrong team, right? So, like, if I take Capella, Bogey, and DJ coming into this season, that's over $60 million, right? So he is spending. He just spending it on the wrong guys, or guys that are individually talented, but collectively it's not a cohesive unit that wins. And so that's where Landry comes in and the front office and the scouts to be able to evaluate and say, okay, I think this is a group that can win, right? If we take maybe a consolidation trade is something we always talk about. That never came. Like, we never consolidated the group together and say, okay, let's take 2020 and combined it for one $50 million player with Trey to get us over the hump. So you're right about him coming out and kind of explaining his criteria, I guess, or what he's looking for to say, okay, this is the moment, or this isn't the moment, or this is the group of guys, or this isn't the group of guys. With Trey putting pressure on, do you think that increases the likelihood of him finally spending the money?
I mean, I think it just depends on, again, what their plan is. I feel like Trey's a guy who, in this process, I don't think he's like when Jimmy Butler asked out in Minnesota, or like, James Harden. I don't think he's like that. You know, I think he's a guy. He's just like, are we making an effort to be competitive? That's ultimately what he wants to know. Are we making an effort? And if he doesn't feel like the effort is being made, or he feels like that they're going in a direction that shows them that, hey, we may take a step back, then it's understandable why Trey may want to ask out. But then the definition is, okay, what is that? What does that mean? Oh, we're trying to be competitive, you know? Well, if we have the number one pick and we draft the center to upgrade the defense and be your new pick and roll partner that could actually be better than what you and Clint Capella were, how can you say that's not helping the team get better? And you can he has more stability long term, But at the same time, I think the thing is Trey, because Trey went through that 21-21 experience. No one expected him to be where they were. You could just have a really good season. I'm sure people looked at that team and thought, I mean, best player is Trey. You're saying best player on the team is who? Bogey, John Collins. So, he's been through, like, listen, if you at least give me the team around me, the pieces that fit, guys who play together, everything like that, we definitely have an opportunity to be competitive, because for them, if the Hawks end up being a 5th seed next year, that's technically an improvement. You're in the playoffs. You're not in the play-in. You're firmly in the playoffs. You can't say you didn't get better. That's the key. What is people's definition of that? Because there's some people who look at us not being in the play-in and think if we're not in the East Conference Finals next year, then we're not getting better. And then it makes no sense. So it just depends on what your definition of it is.
Yeah. And so lastly, Brice, if you're the GM, Brice, what's the appropriate risk for you this summer? Balancing, like I said, Trey wanting to win. We haven't really defined what that is, but obviously it's better than what this past season was. But you're also balancing, like you mentioned earlier, that long-term stability, right? We don't want to risk it all for a 2-year rental or a 3-year rental, and then we're bottoming out again, right? So for you, like, what's the appropriate risk?
The risk you have to look at and take is this player, first, does he fit what we want to do? Does he fit with our core? Does he make us better? How does he make us better? Breaking that down. Once you break down if he makes us better, then, okay, is there another piece we can add? Whose play could improve because we add this player? That's all the things that you have to think about when you're building a team that I think a lot of people don't think about. They just think, well, at this guy, we're automatically better, and they don't think about how that impacts. That's why you see Donovan Mitchell has, from the results, hurt Darius Garland, and that's sometimes what happens when you add guys together. And so you have to figure out how can we add a guy, but also, enhance players. That's going to be the biggest thing. And you got to figure out if there's a guy you can trade for that works for that, then make that. If it's drafting, then do that. If it's a free agent, then do that. It's just a matter of, okay, where do you feel like your biggest points of needs are? Who's available from all 3 phases of where you can acquire players? Which players fit the best thing on your team? And then you make the decision, and then you go with it, and then you put the plan in action. That's what every team that is elite now has done. They found guys who fit what they needed. Denver said, we need 3-and-D guys to go with Murray, and we need guys who are versatile around Joker. Boom, that's what you got. Now they're one of the best teams in the league. Timberwolves said, listen, got Rudy Gobert. We got Cat. We got Ant. Let's get longer. Let's get even more defense. They added Nikhil Walker. Jaden McDaniels, guys like that. He's like, you just got to think, okay, what fits? Like every team that you feel like is still there, kind of their teams fit. You don't feel like these are weird pieces that a team puts together. Everybody fits. And that's the biggest thing, is that the Hawks have not had players that fit. And I think sometimes we're just like, let's just add him because he's a good player, instead of like, but does he really fit with what we got going on here? Because the last thing you want to do is try to fit a piece that doesn't belong just because you're desperate to win. So that's going to be the big thing realistically that you have to take into consideration when the Hawks are making that decision of, do you go draft, or do you go free agency, or do you do trade, or do you do 2 of the 3? You know, what is going to help us maintain what we need, but also get us closer to where we want to go?
Well said. Well said. I mean, for me, I have confidence in Landry to be able to evaluate all three of those measures. I know a lot of people don't, right? Like, there's about how he got to power, back and forth, all the cynicism
Mhm.
around him, right? But I kind of separate that and say, okay, let's look at the job he's done. Had a good draft class. Got a combo, I think, on a steal market value comparatively to what we signed him for. Same thing with DeJounte Murray, right? So Bay, he's a good player. Whether he fits long term, financially, etc., that's a different discussion. But he's a good player, right? And so I feel like Landry, yes, he is young, but I feel like Landry has an idea of what he's doing. Now it's about execute. Can he execute and deliver a winner? Relative, I mean, it depends. It's relative what a winner means to you. But can he deliver a winner, and can he do it on a somewhat accelerated timeline?
Mhm.
Whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, as opposed to that long window that a typical GM may get, which is 7 years, 6, 7 years. So I think balancing the two, kind of figuring out where he kind of needs to pivot as far as the roster from kind of, and that, another thing that I think a lot of people don't kind of take into account. Clearly, looking at this draft class that we just had compared to the previous 5 draft classes, there's a difference in the player that's been identified when you look at Kobe compared to an AJ, right? So maybe he has a different vision than Travis had. Maybe that takes a little bit longer to identify various components of that and blend it into the overall roster. So that's just another kind of piece that people, I think, need to look at when you look at the whole picture. As, man, Landry didn't trade for this guy at the deadline or whatever. Like, it's
Mhm.
more encompassing than that. You got to look at kind of the whole picture that you mentioned.
Yeah,
Um, I'm going to ask the chat if they have any questions before I let you go.
sir.
No. Any questions from the chat? Anybody?
Don't be shy.
No. Comments about Landry? Nothing.
Hey man, he's talking to town. What do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. How much more time to give Landry? What do you think, Brice? How much more time
Much
before he's on
time?
a club?
I mean, I feel like depending on what the direction is, if they're trying to take the slow development route, it sounds like he might have 2 years um, to get it together, unless something goes terribly wrong next year. Realistically, if the team continues to do bad in the next couple of years, you could probably see the entire front office and everybody getting cleaned out. So that's what I would look at it as.
Okay. One says, why wouldn't we trade Trey? I think you kind
It's
of
not,
touched on it earlier, but
I mean,
if you could
it's not
touch
that
on
you
again.
can't. It's just again, it's one of those things where then who's the Hawks' best player, DeJounte or Jalen? And if it's DeJounte, I think he's the top 50 guy in the league. And so when you go into postseason play, DeJounte will probably never be the best player in the series. And you're really hoping that just as a team that's better than another team, you know? Because sometimes when you win series, what you've seen with Denver and Minnesota series, Joker's taking over that series. He's best player in that series. Trey has the ability to do that. He's done it before. Like that's the thing. We literally have evidence of it. Like we can't just act like it doesn't exist. He just has been placed in that position again in a few years. So that's just why I do it. Listen, if you feel like they should trade Trey, so be it. You know, I'm not gonna hate your where your thinking is. I am a person who's always open to different perspectives, and if you have your perspective, then that's how it goes. You know, it's part of life. So
Yeah. I mean, for the record, I would disagree with that. I think if you trade him, it's next year, right? Once you see a trade, I have really tried to put a team around
mm,
you. I just, so I did you a solid. It's just not working for both sides. So, where you want to go. But I think that's next year in a more robust draft. where you can possibly trade them for a pick in that draft and then a future facing draft. And now you can kind of start the rebuild a little bit quicker as opposed to trading them now in this class where I think universally it's not a great draft, right? So let's kind of take the emotion out and think more strategically. But having said that, thank you, Brice, for joining me and having this interview. You plugged it at the beginning, but you could plug it as well as we conclude. Anything else?
Yeah, like I said, guys, just got audio wise, my latest Believe in Hawks podcast up right now. NBA Insider on there giving insight on what the Hawks' plans are for the offseason. So if you want to check that out, you want to hear a different voice, you can definitely go over there. You can listen to it on any podcast platform that you prefer. Or like I said, you can wait to watch it on my YouTube, which will be up tomorrow. Brice 2K, or just look up Believe in Hawks and you'll find my channel. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, Brice_2K as well. That obviously also is a big thank you to you guys who do that just to help support me and what I'm trying to do and try to build, as you know, and also with all the other Atlanta content creators out there, as we're trying to help provide content to you guys, so you guys have something that you got debate and discussion about. Like I said, I have no issue with people who don't agree with me and things of that nature, because it's just part of sports. It's conversation, it's discussion. And as long as we don't disrespect each other doing it, then we're all good.
Right. Exactly. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I really appreciate it, Brice. And we will be live later this week. I think Damon is scheduling something tomorrow, guys, so we can talk more about SAR. We can talk more about the draft, free agency, et cetera, and we can kind of let our opinions be known. A page for the fans, for them to voice their opinion. Thank you, guys.